also thank you and welcome to all the panelists of this fifth session, our final session for today on international cooperation and education, as Sophie already introduced. Again, I present myself. I'm project officer here at UNESCO, in charge of the EU-funded project on inter-regional and cross-cutting action aiming to strengthen the fight against illicit trafficking of cultural property. And we heard yesterday Ana Ramirez from the European Commission on this issue as well. I have today with me 4 panelists, and before starting, I will give a very short introduction. I don't want to take too much time from our very rich input that we can expect at this session today. I just want to give a couple of points linked to the title of international cooperation or cooperation in general and education, something that already was mentioned during this morning session, some aspects to think about the formal and the informal aspects, about cross-disciplinary and intergenerational, but also lifelong learning. So we will here have a couple of professors with us, but it's a very broad approach that we need to look at the formal education, but also at the awareness raising aspects of it. And we will listen to a very concrete example very shortly, which means we are here among experts, but we are also thinking about how to address the larger public and how do we do this in context of networks, different types of networks. Again, here as well, formal ones, if you want, as states parties to the 1970 convention, but also more, let's say, informal ones like the natural one, and something that is very, very structured through an NGO as ICOM. And so we have different sort of cooperation with the projects that we've already mentioned, and where, for instance, in the one that I have the pleasure to handle, the peer-to-peer activities, which means we are joining together different professionals from countries to exchange among each others, and the Netherlands is one of the pilot countries that is with us. A final word on the outputs of also previous projects, and that are of course material, very useful material for cooperation and education. The toolkit that I would like to here show, which is addressed to European judiciaries and law enforcement, and that we are translating into different languages, but also different other aspects like the videos that were produced in previous EU-funded projects here at UNESCO, and that could, for instance, be useful for also museums to show, and as a little video somewhere where you have a spot to show and raise awareness to the aspects of fighting illicit trafficking. So without taking too much more of your time, I'm pleased to invite our first speaker, who is Vincent Michel. Vincent Michel is professor of art history and archaeology at the University of Poitiers in France. He's Orientalist, archaeologist, and professor, as I said, and he's a director of the French archaeological mission in Libya, which you will see has a lot to do with what he will present to us. He's also director of the archaeological mission in Hebron in Palestine, and an expert in the fight against looting and trafficking of cultural property in the MENA region more largely. He cooperates with investigative forces as well as national and international heritage institutions, and he will give us a presentation and talk about more specifically on the exhibition which is ongoing at the Louvre here in Paris, France, on antique sculptures from Libya and Syria, and how to fight against illicit trafficking. So again, as also was done in the previous sessions, I have two concrete questions to you, Vincent Michel. So first of all, why such an exhibition at the Museum of the Louvre, and why now? And what is presented? So we are certainly, everybody's curious because we haven't been able to travel very much, so nobody could come to, or very few could come to Paris to see it. So please share already with us some insights and some pictures. Thank you.
Yeah, merci beaucoup. Je remercie beaucoup l'ICOM et l'UNESCO d'organiser.
Thank you very much to ICOM and UNESCO for organizing such a meeting focusing on museums and museum staff. So, fighting against illicit trafficking of cultural goods. There are two main pillars: raise awareness and train. So in the awareness raising aspect, we decided to open this exhibition. So I'm an archaeologist. I'm very much involved in this theme. I have been, so for 10 years, have been involved in countering illicit trafficking. So this exhibition will last for 7 months, from May to end of December. So hurry up for those who haven't seen it yet. And I worked with Ludovic Logier as a curator, as a specialist in ancient sculpture. And we also worked with two students, Morgan Belzic and Camille Blanchet. So I'm very happy to have the opportunity to talk about the exhibition because it's a great example of interdisciplinary cooperation between different worlds. Until recently, things worked in silos, but because of current events, we have to work together. It's a constraint, but it's good. The world of culture, the world of investigation, customs, gendarmes, police, and the judicial environment. So it's a very cross-cutting approach, from the identification of objects until the cases are brought to court. And all of this should lead to returns. That's the ultimate goal. So with this exhibition, the goal is to raise awareness, inform people. Sometimes we're not yet at the stage of training, but it's just awareness raising, but also it's all about mobilizing people. People need to be aware that it's urgent to fight such a scourge. And all of this is taking place in a very prestigious place, the Louvre museums. You have visitors, potential buyers, sellers, people working on the art market, investigators as well, the judicial world, and museum staff. It's the first time in France that such an exhibition is presented, and it was made possible thanks to several points. So the first one being destructions carried out by ISIS in Iraq with large-scale looting. Obviously, there's a link with the attacks that were perpetrated in France. So there was a huge shock. Awareness raising in the French population, but also at an international level. So that was the trigger.
The second element is that the Louvre is very interesting, and previous director Jean-Luc Martinez was very involved in this topic, and he will be an ambassador soon for this topic. And on the request of the former President of the French Republic, François Hollande, a report was published on the protection of world heritage. And as I will show you in a moment, objects are being displayed that are part of inquiries, so we needed a legal framework. And it is a very recent law that is involved. So it allows us to display objects that are part of legal cases. And it is a French law of the 7th of July, 2016 that gives French museums the permission to display these objects in the purpose of the research and the inquiry. Of course, those are seized objects. So there's a case from 2012 with 4 sculptures from Libya and other sculptures from the Middle East.
Fait une trentaine de mètres carrés.
So the space is about 30 square meters, but it is very well located, and it is in the direction of the Venice of Milo and close to Mona Lisa. So thousands of visitors will be able to see the exhibition. And another important element is the red color, because people are aware and they notice the red color. It's the color of the terra rossa, which we found the objects. And of course, it is the color of the red lists, which was able to start in 2015. So we have different objects and different colors. Another important element is that when we go to a museum, we know we're going to see objects, and displaying objects needed to provoke a reaction and raise awareness. So displaying these magnificent objects is something normal, but we decided to display them with the context and details. And on several occasions, it was reminded that the objects were seized in 2012 and 2016. The inquiries are still ongoing, and the judge to whom we asked permission, well, what we wanted to do is show that around these objects there can be a crime, whether it be theft or looting. So it requires that we do the verifications required. And another important element is, of course, that all objects, all text, the different paths or different journeys of the object have to be validated by the person in charge of the case and by the inquirer, so by the customs officials. And the goal is to be able to raise awareness on the actions of all and to provide information. And information is sent to Interpol, to the customs, the OCBC, to the Ministry of Culture, so that there is a cooperation around the actions led by all of those stakeholders. And of course, in a museum, you can't say everything. So we provided QR codes so that visitors could have access to extra information using their smartphones. Information from customs officials, from Interpol and other institutions, and of course from UNESCO. The objects displayed are either very well known, we know a lot of information about these objects, and for those objects, almost everything has been said. We can't say a lot more because they have been looted and it is difficult to provide contextual information. So you have these 4 sculptures on the right, which are that of Persephone, and they come from a region of Libya, a very small territory. And they were built for this precise location. So they are important markers. And they can give us insights as to the extent of the looting in the region, of the network. And because we know they come from this region, we can recreate the context. Another element, well, these 2 objects. For these 2 objects, it was more difficult to gather information. They were seized in the French Roissy airport in Paris. Seized by customs. They came from Lebanon. They were transiting towards Thailand. So imagine there are 600 million containers each year transiting, and customs officials cannot check everything that transits. So those objects were beautiful sculptures, which it is difficult to research the provenance because they come from Syria, from Lebanon. We don't know. It is difficult to give an exact date, difficult to explain how they were used. Of the authentic, we don't know. With these objects, what was interesting was that we could track down where they had transited. And we cannot say anything about these objects. For some of these objects, it is difficult to say anything. So we want to be able to say, to have more information on these objects. In Lebanon, objects were destroyed, seized, looted. We have research, reports. We cannot ignore, we cannot underestimate the significance of the illicit trafficking of cultural property. If we acquire objects without making the necessary verifications, aren't we destroying in a way? Destroying, hindering the remembrance. This was an important element of the exhibition. And we also wanted to raise awareness on the different stakeholders, and so that the actors could inform their hierarchy and act better. This was made possible at the Louvre Museum, and hopefully it will inspire other projects around the world.
Thank you very much. I think, now action is this. Yeah, thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much, Vincent Michel. I think this is, well, first of all, it's an excellent example, and plus it gives lots of inspiration, I think, to other places to consider doing a similar exhibition, which is an enormous undertaking, of course, but I think you will get also a lot of questions and requests to share even more of your expertise here. So thank you very much. Let's move on to our next panelist, who is Alicia Jagielska-Burdock. Alicia is a professor at the University of Opole and holds the UNESCO chair on cultural property law. She is also co-founder and chief editor of the international journal Santander Art and Culture Law Review. And since 2014, she has been nominated by the Polish government as a mediator for UNESCO's Intergovernmental Committee for Return and Restitution. I abbreviate here the title, which is ICPRCP. And she's currently also involved in our UNESCO's regional studies on the state of illicit trafficking of cultural property and museums. Alicia will focus on the aspect of promoting international cooperation and education through the UNESCO Chair Network. And I will ask the two questions right away at once, so you can decide how to reply. So from your experience and current research, what are the European specificities for cultural property law practice that can foster international cooperation? And since you are an active member of the UNESCO Chair Network, what can be done to better connect research and education with the daily practice to fight illicit trafficking? So welcome, Alicia, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation, and congratulations on this workshop. It's a very valuable experience, and the online format allows us to reach the broader audience, and this is our goal. I believe that having this meeting recorded and available on YouTube, it will enable many other people to watch it afterwards, which is significant since this online meeting provides a very valuable overview of pivotal issues regarding fight with the illicit traffic. So far, the European experience can be perceived as a good basis. Just to note the number of countries that have ratified 1970 Convention. For instance, the crucial contribution of the EU to this area was already mentioned by Anna Kędziorek-Ramirez yesterday in her insightful presentation. For example, the new expected document action plan on tackling the illicit traffic in cultural goods and continuing focus on training, capacity building are also measures that will help to support UNESCO's and international efforts to fight with illicit traffic. Yesterday, Maria Dahlstrom mentioned the provenance network in case of legal practice. The network is also very important, as well constant activity and participation in workshops such as this one and seminars. Targeted actions for stakeholders are particularly significant, and we must add that all the actions has to be shaped and tailor cut for the target group. They are prepared and thought. Maria Van Heese today mentioned that in the procedure on return, cooperation is necessary. Just before me the display of objects that are part of legal cases or that have been seized were described by Vincent Michael. I would like the case of the tiles from Uzbekistan exhibited in British Museum. The implementation of the EU Directive 2014 on the return on cultural objects can be also helpful. The overview of national legislation implementing the directive is available in Santander Cultural Law Review from 2016, is available in open access. The most important actions are the activities undertaken by member states to define national treasures, internal market informational system, and last but not least, introduction of due diligence concept from the 1995 Convention in acts in the directive and in acts implementing it. The issue of due diligence was the topic of the yesterday's session chaired by Marina Schneider. Perhaps this experience could be useful to keep in mind while working on revising and debating the new draft model provisions on prevention and fight against the illicit traffic of cultural property. That is the project launched this year. The specificity of national systems forces the future draft model provisions to leave some room for national lawmakers to insert, to prepare tailor-made provisions to comply with domestic laws. Coming back to the UNESCO UNITWIN and UNESCO Chairs program, the program was initiated in 1992, so it has next year there will be anniversary. Since then, I believe the program has evolved, and the current activities of UNESCO chair teams are very supportive. I truly believe that meetings of UNESCO chairs, especially in the area of culture, are very important to develop cooperative relationships in this field, especially when we need this bird eye view and the problems such as fight with illicit traffic actually requires an interdisciplinary approach, cooperation with enforcement agencies, consultation with experts from different fields. I had the opportunity to attend such meeting in 2017, and I believe it's the variety of perspectives and ideas presented there just confirmed that this is a very important, project. I believe that the involvement of UNESCO chairs in research is obvious, and this is anchored in the program's core mission. The question is how to promote this research, and it has to be available through, for instance, open access. The educational dimension outside the academia, reaching to broader audience, is also an important pillar. The issue of educating non-professionals was raised yesterday by the caller Oswald from Slovenia, and I completely agree with her. When it comes to suggestions, conclusions, what we need in the future, I think that we will be forced to focus more on online tools and use new technologies to expand our reach. For example, our team, UNESCO Chair on Cultural Property Law in Opole, several years ago prepared a short series presenting the basic information about culture and law in Poland. It consisted of short films about definition of cultural property, national treasure. Now we are thinking of preparing another series in English for upcoming years involving UNESCO chairs and interested scholars. For instance, the online seminars have been introduced. Professor Doriak from the University of Technology, Sydney. She is the UNESCO chair in the International Law and Cultural Heritage. Professor Xiongxia Wang in Beijing is focusing on awareness building actions as well. Existing initiatives such as RAMP, Responsible Art Market, and the Artemis database are run by Art Law Center, led by Professor Marc-André Renaud, UNESCO Chair in International Law of the Protection of Cultural Heritage. The projects undertaken that I have described and referred to are complementary while reaching to different audiences, allowing us to broaden the scope of UNESCO's influence. Last but not least, I think the project on preparing massive open online course that would be available for public without any fee would also fit the needs and connect the areas of research and education within the cultural field. I'm fairly confident that very soon, due to the AI and new ICT tools and new apps and games will appear to address the illicit traffic problems, due diligence as essential part of the acquisition process. By maintaining UNESCO chairs up to date with new technologies, new developments, we will be better to connect research and education and address the problems. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alicia. I think it's a very good overview of UNESCO chairs and their activities, it's a very rich network as well to tap into, and you've given some examples from around the world that we will see how to better also share this on the different platforms that we have here at our disposal to make the research better known, and also in these contexts like workshops like today to be able to share it. And as you said, this workshop will indeed be visible also later on for people to watch at any time, and so to share also this information at later stages. So thank you again very much, Alicia. We're moving on to Alessio Re. Alessio, welcome. You're Secretary General of the Fondazione Sant'Agata and also Associate Professor at the universities of Torino, Turin, and Pisa. And you work as a coordinator of the Master in Cultural Property Protection and Crisis Response, and the Master in World Heritage and Cultural Projects for Development, and the International Academy on UNESCO and Sustainable Development, as well as the Heritage Beyond Walls program. So quite a number of initiatives on your plate indeed. And you will tell us more in focus on what is called CPP in our program, which is the Cultural Property Protection Crisis Response, and the need for interdisciplinary competences. So as a first star, I will also again put both questions directly to you, so you can decide how to respond. Well, in the context of the political priority of nations to target sustainable development and capacity building to achieve those sustainable development goals, what is the link, or is there a link with the protection of cultural heritage? And when talking about education and preparing education programs on cultural property protection, what is, in your opinion, the most sensitive issue to consider? Alessio, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Kerstin. Hello, everybody. Nice to be with you today, and especially to learn from you. So thank you for providing me this occasion. Two very important points. So let me start from the first one. I really do believe that the reference you made to the global political priorities is very important, actually, because we all know that we need and we do want to protect heritage, but it's critical to understand and to repeat ourselves why we do that. That's my point. And we are all living in an age critically concerned by in the climate, in the society, digital health as well. We know change is all around us. And these radical changes occurring all across the world are now generating a sort of unprecedented call to action. And it's a call that requires all of us, all the available resources that we have. And it's here that we come to cultural heritage. The importance and role of culture have risen significantly in recent years because of the emergence of new forms of conflicts, because of the intensification of disasters. I'm speaking now from a place which is close to Torino in Italy, which is affected, has already been affected, but is currently affected by flooding. It's an heritage, it's an post-industrial heritage place. So intensification of this disaster is clear. We know it, we see it very frequently. And all this has brought the international community to intensify the efforts to protect heritage, to what we call, dependent by the context, protecting cultural property or cultural heritage. But it's quite relevant to me to say that we protect heritage not for heritage itself, but for what it represents. And in the end, we protect heritage to maintain peace among people. That's actually what UNESCO says in its Foundation Act, of which it recurs this year, the 75th anniversary, building peace in the minds of men. So ensuring heritage and action, safeguarding cultural sites, combating illicit traffic of cultural artifacts or properties, they to enhance our community against to change and resist to its negative effects. Especially, this is especially true in conflict areas or in weak areas, in crisis area or post-conflict as well, where all these assume many more and more valuable meanings. Heritage can enhance resilience to change. But of course, for making this happen, we need to invest. We need to invest our efforts in building, in education, as opportunities for raising awareness, for youth especially, for youth, for the next generation especially. That's what we do, explained in really a nut with our property protection. Master started 4 years, very large panel of partners, including the art, including the answer. And the master is basically to try to build awareness, build capacities, and build alliances, because such big challenges, the illicit traffic market is something huge. We all know it. We cannot address, we cannot approach such big issues alone. So the scope in the end of building, of investing in education is possibly enhancing the cooperation and supporting all the existing actors, agencies, NGO, local institutions like museums proposing exhibition on illicit traffic, like Saint Michel was showing a few minutes before, to support all of these actors in their effort toward the protection of cultural property as a resource for our future. And coming to the question, sensitive issue. Yes, let me stress again the concept of future, because again, we live, especially thinking to conflict areas, in contexts where there is economic depression, social depression, resources exploitation, and we need to take action against this, but especially so the most delicate point to me is the need exactly to support youth. Sorry?
Sorry, the connection was a bit weak, so I hope it,
okay, sorry.
It stays again. So maybe if you could just repeat the last sentence, sorry.
Yes, of course. I was saying that the most delicate point, the most sensitive issue to me is exactly the need to support youth, especially youth from conflict areas, and especially in access to knowledge. Investing in knowledge transfer is essential. And it assumes even a more relevant meaning in a moment when the education poverty is in many countries, including the so-called developed ones, because of the lockdown, the pandemic, and its effect. So the limited accessibility to knowledge is affected by conflicts is obviously going to impact on the people's future capacity to work recovery. Last year, thinking about this, based in Torino, but last year, a program which is called Heritage Beyond Walls, self-financed by our foundation, and working with Syria and Syrian students, support especially the access to knowledge on cultural heritage subjects for youth from a country facing around 10 conflict and being isolated because of that. This year we launched a little called EBLA, to support scholarship for students into cultural heritage subjects, to provide them some facilitation in accessing to knowledge. So the most delicate issues is this, because without accessing knowledge, none of us can really be free. And without freedom, it's impossible to build peace. So again, we are doing all this, I guess, I do believe, for building peace. That's my answer.
Thank you very much, Alessio. I think these considerations are extremely important to keep in mind for all of us, and your activities are very, very interesting, because they also show how to bring, to share quite simply the expertise and the knowledge that we happen to have here in Europe, as we are coming together here to a large extent. We are European representatives at this meeting, but there's so much to share, to also learn from other regions and vice versa. So I think the aspect of education and keeping education a public good is essential here. So thank you again for sharing your thoughts and your experience with us. We move on to Edward Oakes. Edward is working for ICOM. He is part of the Heritage Protection Department and a historian by training. And he's, well, a graduate in history and cultural policy at the University or College of Dublin, and has worked in many European museum and heritage protection projects. And he's currently a PhD candidate at the IMT in Lucca, where he's doing research on the historic evolution of EU law and policy to combat the smuggling of cultural goods. Ted will present to us the ICOM International Observatory, which has been mentioned at several occasions already yesterday. So now we will learn about it in more detail. So, well, there are very concrete questions on this, quite simply. So what is it exactly, the ICOM International Observatory, and how has it been set up, and what would be the next stages of development of it? So Ted, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Kirsten. Can you all hear me, and can you see the screen? Great. Thank you very much for that introduction, and thank you very much to all the other speakers as well for the really fascinating presentations we've had over the last 2 mornings. And I think, as Sophie said, we could do an entire week with all the information we have here, but our time is limited, so I'll keep it brief. But thank you very much to everybody. First of all, I suppose the big question, what is the observatory? Why an observatory? Well, as we saw this morning and yesterday, ICOM has a lot of tools at its disposal that can be used to fight against the illicit trafficking of cultural goods. We heard about the Code of Ethics, which of course is a museum tool to guide museum professionals. And we also heard of the red lists as well, which are museum tools, education tools used outside the museum setting. And we also heard some excellent presentations as well on due diligence, on museum security and cooperation. And these practices and these tools really are vital in terms of trying to tackle illicit trafficking and trying to protect cultural heritage. But in terms of understanding the phenomenon that is illicit trafficking, in terms of trying to get to the root of it, that is something different. And it's something that the red lists and the Code of Ethics, they are useful, but they cannot really tell us the origin of the problem. And if we want to solve the problem, we really need to get to the root of it. We need to understand it. And that's really where the observatory came into being. It's really why it was created in the first place. So, can you see the next slide? There we go. Excellent. So the observatory was created in 2011, and it was basically established as a place to monitor and to gather information on the illicit trade of cultural goods. And as Anna Kajarek Ramirez said yesterday, we were supported in this endeavor by the European Union. The observatory has two main functions. Now, the first function of the observatory was as a platform, as a forum, and a place to network and a place to collaborate, a place for heritage experts to meet and discuss the problems of the day. So we had museum experts, we had lawyers, customs officials, police officers, as well as our major partners, UNESCO, UNIDROIT, the World Customs Organization, Interpol. The idea, one of the first ideas of the observatory was to bring these people together and to discuss the common challenges, to conduct field work and to conduct research as well into the illicit trafficking of cultural goods. And this phase largely concluded in 2016 with the publication Countering the Illicit Trafficking in Cultural Goods, which was a series of articles and a series of academic publications from professionals in the area, academics, museum professionals, heritage professionals from all backgrounds discussing the illicit trade of cultural goods. And this book is still available. It is online, it is free to download, and it is still very much a useful tool in terms of trying to understand the dynamics and the fundamentals of illicit trade. But as I said, this phase of initial phase concluded in 2016, and the largest phase that we have, and the largest phase of the observatory in general, is probably its information database. This is still available online. It is still accessible to the public and to the wider public. And the basic idea of the database here is that if you have questions, if you have queries on the illicit trafficking of cultural goods, specific questions on countries or on actors involved, or even research articles, you can go to this online database that is free and open to the public, and it can help you understand more about the illicit trade. And the reasoning behind this was that in 2011, while there is a lot of information right now, in 2011, the observatory was badly needed because there really wasn't a lot of information available at the time for the wider public to explore and understand what is and is now recognized as a major security threat. And indeed, I'm speaking not just as a museum professional, but also as a researcher myself. While we have made great improvements in trying to get information on the illicit trade of cultural goods, a few years back, the situation was very different. So thankfully, tools and databases like the observatory are providing a place where we can go and where we can get more information on the illicit trade of cultural goods. But this is an ongoing project as well, I think I should mention as well. We continually need information on the illicit trade of cultural goods, and I know Corrado yesterday spoke about Interpol's statistics, and we need to continue gathering information like this if we want to keep addressing the challenges of the future. And given that the first few years of the observatory were such a success, we are now trying to reposition the observatory for the next few years and continuing to gather information and continuing to update the database that is the observatory is important in this regard. And this brings me to my next question. So what next for the observatory? Well, for the future, I think we discussed some of the problems already and some of the challenges that we are facing in the coming years. More recently, of course, there's the COVID-19 pandemic, which there's security threats because of this at museums and archaeological sites. Museums certainly are put under great strain. But we're also hearing about online sales, increased online sales across the globe, often without any checks or any due diligence. So these are two of the most immediate problems we're facing, but not necessarily exclusive problems. And more broadly as well, I think there's also a growing realization as well that this is international actors are realizing that the illicit trade of cultural property is a growing security problem. We are historians, a lot of us here, we're archaeologists, art historians, museum professionals, and we are engaged in efforts to try and protect cultural goods because we have an interest in doing it, because we want to protect these objects. We want to protect heritage, and also what these objects represent. They carry a lot of valuable information in them, but there is growing realization in government circles that the illicit trade of cultural property is a growing security threat, and it is just as dangerous to society and just as profitable to criminal organizations as any other form of smuggling. So the dynamics and understandings of illicit trafficking are changing. But I think it's important to be positive as well, that while we are facing new challenges and we are repositioning the observatory to address these challenges, we are also seeing excellent new advances, such as the Interpol ID Art. We saw the Kiku application as well, and we've heard from our partners in customs and police who have been working heavily in this area for many years. We've also heard as well about the European Union legislation, which is coming into force in the coming years. And this has the potential to really influence change in this area. So while there are challenges, we are seeing some very important developments as well. But I suppose what I really want to highlight, and is something that for me, I think is important for the next stage of the observatory, and I think it sums up nicely what we've been discussing in these last 2 mornings. It is building on the existing knowledge of the museum professionals to try and prepare the observatory for these challenges that we are facing. We saw today and yesterday that museum professionals really are experts when it comes to the smuggling, to the protection of cultural goods. Museum professionals are often at the core of this work, and they have a wealth of experience and information at their availability that can be leveraged to protect heritage. And indeed, increased cooperation between museums and non-museum organizations is vital in this area. And so in ICOM, we are seeking to prepare the observatory to address these challenges and to use the experience of the museum community and to find a way to spotlight this experience, just like we spotlighted the information and the lack of information 10 years ago. So when we first started the observatory, as I said, we did not have that much information available to the public, but obviously the observatory helped spotlight this. And I think another important element here, we can safely say that after this workshop, we can see that there's a wealth of actors out there. We now are increasing information, we are now having increasing information available to us. We need to continue this, but I think this workshop also shows us that we have a wealth of actors out there, actors who maybe previously weren't as well known to the public for their experience. I think if we recall also what Sophie said in her very opening presentation yesterday, museums have been working on this for decades. Indeed, ICOM was working on this in the 1940s. So if we can find a way to leverage this experience, this I think would be vital in the next stage of the observatory. And that's really what we're looking for as well for 2022, to try and leverage this experience to address the problems of the future. We've already relaunched our social media accounts, and we're regularly updating and spreading information that we can find. We're continuously trying to raise awareness. And this is one of the first steps we have carried out in terms of the relaunch of the observatory. And 2022, we will aim to leverage the expertise of the museum professionals that we've seen today and yesterday to address the problems of the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ted. This is an excellent project and platform, and such a gist of information that I've been able to compile here, and all the planning that you have for the future means that we will certainly continue to come together and also contribute to building this this platform even more, this observatory. So thank you very much also to all the 4 panelists who've been talking about aspects of the international cooperation and education. I would like to, with these words, close this session. We have a few minutes. If we want to be on time, we would have now a few minutes to wrap up, Sophie and myself. So Sophie, the floor is yours.
Merci, Kirstine.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Kirstine. I'm going to continue in French because this was a bilingual workshop. So firstly, I would like to thank all of you. That's the least I can do, because this workshop was supposed to take place before the pandemic in February 2020, and we have to cancel everything because it was too complicated to have experts come to Paris to do it. Then we tried to reschedule it because we wanted it to take place face-to-face, but then we decided to do it online. But what's great about it is that we were able to bring together many more experts. So that wasn't so bad. Thank you to UNESCO for asking ICOM to work with them. Thank you to the European Union for their support to UNESCO projects and for the various phases. Each year, the museum community and ICOM, we're all very happy to carry out this project with you. And it's just a beginning. We will have larger projects carried out hand in hand with UNESCO. Secondly, obviously, we had to amend the agenda so that it's more adapted to a virtual meeting. So we had 4 sessions: collection management, preventive conservation, then due diligence and acquisition, thirdly, cooperation with law enforcement agencies, and fourth, cooperation, international cooperation, and education. Well, that was no coincidence. It's because we really wanted to work on these 4 themes. Cultural goods trafficking, that's something that you can approach in many different ways. You have the legal, judicial approach, the police point of view, customs point of view, the educational aspect as well, awareness raising, etc., etc. So the approach that we chose today was the input of museums, but also the role of culture professionals. So it was a bit broader, although obviously because we were involved, we focused on museums. So it was very important to see that we decided to focus on museums. What's the experience of museums as players, and how can they bring in their expertise? Because whatever the approach is, museums always have a role to play as experts. So their expertise is always necessary. And it was very important to focus on museums and to develop many different angles. So I wanted to insist on that. I also know that there are many people today who could have spoken for 1 hour. Maybe it was impossible because of the format. So the idea was to focus on a couple of themes, 2 questions per panelist. And you know, I've been working in the field for a long time, and yet I've learned so many things since yesterday morning. So I was very grateful to learn so much. It's a subject that keeps evolving. We know that the format was not ideal, but we did everything we could to make it as relevant as possible on 2 mornings. So sorry for the experts that we had to interrupt, but we enjoyed your inputs tremendously. And I'm sure that it's the same thing for participants. One last point is that we had regional focus in cooperation with the EU. So that was how we designed it, but we heard what we said for 2 days. Everything is applicable at an international level. We could have done the same thing with other panelists in other regions. And there's a true momentum in Europe as well, because the legislation that we mentioned and the projects that are pushed at the moment. We talked about the observatory, other tools that are being developed, as Corinne Chatrel mentioned. new interesting thing. So it was a regional approach, but it's an international theme. I thought that what Lucas said was very relevant. He said that first and foremost, it's a national problem. So we always say a national challenge, but first and foremost, it's really a national challenge. And at the level of the European continent, we can do something that's even more powerful in the structure of the EU. So I think that we know the path that we should take so that the EU can support international cooperation and national structures. Well, I'll leave it there. Let me just thank my team. There's not many of us. There's Azatis Ferreira, coordinator of the department, and Ted Oakes, who came to support us a few months ago and who's become a pillar in the team. So thank you to both of them. And thank you to you, Kirsten, for your excellent cooperation in the past few months. And one last thank you to the panelists and to the moderators, because their job is not easy. Thank you so much to all of you, and see you soon.
Thank you, Sophia. I just join in again to thank everyone, starting also again with the European Commission for making this possible, that we could organize this event today. Also joining to thank my colleagues here at UNESCO behind the scenes, the technicians, the interpreters, my colleagues, Blondine and all the equipe here in the Secretariat of the 1970 Convention for helping with this. And last but not least, of course, thanking all of you panelists and partners for being with us today. And please stay tuned. So we will certainly have occasions to continue this exchange and continue cooperation in this way. So thank you very much. All the best to you. Stay safe. And talk to you very soon, I hope.